I want to do something a little bit weird, a little bit different, a little bit kind of what's the point? You know, because this is not gonna be like a takedown video or really a response video, because I don't even really know what to think about this. It's gonna be a reaction video, but not like a reaction video like I do on stream. I don't know. I just felt the need to do this off stream. I felt the need to make a little bit more of a production out of this one because I thought this one was kind of interesting. It's just a video for us to kind of explore this idea with this other guy, Become the Night. I've seen a lot of this guy's videos in the past. I don't even really know what to think of him. He seems like kind of a pretentious guy. Like, he has a lot of opinions about music. Not all of them seem all that justified. I know that he identifies as a right-wing liberal. So politically, maybe that kind of helps inform how we view him. Not saying that we should necessarily judge what he's saying by his politics, but just we can kind of see. It's just interesting to see how the way people politically identify does kind of inform and say something about how they view the world, how they view other things. But there's this video, so there's two videos that he made kind of a long time ago. One of them is called, in quotation marks, "Rap isn't music." So he's not saying that rap isn't music. He's talking about the statement, rap isn't music. But then he made another one to follow up on it, saying that he was wrong and he no longer thinks that rap isn't music. I was going to do this for a vet-in a little while ago, but I just thought it would be too much work for one day. And because I wasn't even really sure what I was going to do with this video. Like I said, I'm not even really sure what this video is going to be, because this isn't just going to be a straight up takedown, because the guy kind of walked this position back, and we're going to watch both of these videos. But I watched a lot of this first video and a bit of the second video, and I kind of ended up thinking, like, there's still a lot here that's just kind of like a weird thought process that I want to unpack. I have a lot of thoughts about this, but let's just see what he has to say.
So I had to remake this entire video. I did about 37 minutes worth of footage yesterday and boiled it down to about 17 minutes. And while I was editing it, I just knew I wasn't getting my point across properly. My thoughts were just so jumbled everywhere.
And see, that's the first sign. It's like he doesn't even really know what to make out of the video while he's making it. Not a great sign. I mean, usually I find that when that happens, because that has happened to me, when that happens to me, I usually just end up scrapping the whole thing and coming back to it way later. I've actually done that like a bajillion times with Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. I cannot figure out how to write a video about that, even though I really want to.
12 Tone, who I think is actually a very good music channel, made a video responding to Ben Shapiro saying he doesn't think rap is music. I actually don't think rap is music either, but we'll get into that. Now, I am sure there is going to be a lot of infuriating comments in the comments.
So we're starting with this first video, him saying he doesn't think rap is music. But he's going to follow up saying that he changed his mind in the second video. So in this first one, we're establishing he doesn't think rap is music. Okay.
Comment section today, which are going to stress me out and make me want to pull my damn hair out. Now, I think 12 Tone did a good job of saying that Ben Shapiro's definition of music and him saying that rap isn't music is just poor arguments, and I agree. Ben's definition of music is a combination of discernible melody, harmony, and rhythm. I think that's far too restrictive and simplified. So 12 Tone explains why.
Okay, so this is where we get to kind of my first thought about this, which is I actually don't know how to define music. I kind of was thinking about this while watching this video a while back, thinking, well, what is music really? And I don't really know. Like, you know it when you hear it, but what is it that you're hearing? It's sounds that have a quality of feeling musical, but what is musical? And we'll get to this in a second.
Then he goes on to reference one of his other videos, What Even Is Music? where he defines music, and his definition of music is actually worse than Ben's. 12 Tone's definition of music is whatever you find musical, and this is very clearly bad logic. To present it in a medium in which 12 Tone may be able to better understand it.
I like this part of the video. This part's funny because he kind of lampoons this whole circular line of our argumentation in such an obvious way that you would think anybody would be able to see how obviously this is illogical to say music is whatever you find musical. Well, what's musical? It's pertaining to music. Well, then we come back around to the point, what's music? So I totally agree with Mike on this part, that this is a very stupid definition of music.
So the obvious question from you is, Mike, how do you define music? I don't have a strict definition. It's very clear that humanity is still trying to discover what that is. That's why
even Mike doesn't have a clear definition of what music is. So this is hard. This is a weirdly hard thing, even though music is something that we all kind of get what it is. It's hard to actually put into words what it is, because it doesn't really make sense. It has this sort of ineffable quality that we all understand. But what is that quality?
Why we have experimental music. I think a large part of how we identify and understand music is intuition. I have both faith and
intuition. Because, like they're ASMR. You can have sounds that have aesthetic qualities that you like ASMR sounds that please you in a certain way. But the way they're pleasing you isn't in a musical way. And so they're not really music. They're sounds. And so you can't just say that music is like aesthetically pleasing sounds or sounds that are valued for their aesthetic qualities. It has to do with tone. It has to do with rhythm. But again, those things can apply to other stuff that's not really music either.
I don't think that we have enough data available to really understand that. I don't know if we have the technology available to gather that data. But if you look at...
I don't really know what data or technology we would need to understand this question. This seems more of a kind of a semantical difficulty, like a limitation in our ability to express with words something that we can understand intuitively. And I'm not even saying that it's impossible to define music. I'm just saying that he has found it difficult and I have found it difficult. And so I don't know, maybe there are other people who have done it right. In fact, let me look it up. Let me actually look up on Google, because people have obviously had to define music, right? So what does the Google dictionary think music is? Music. 1. Vocal or instrumental sounds, or both, combined in such a way as to produce beauty of form, harmony, and expression of emotion. All right. I mean, that makes sense, right? I think that makes sense. I mean, that sounds right. I mean, we got vocal sounds. Like, a vocal sound could be words. But I think what it means by vocal sounds is that it's not necessarily words. It's about the sound more than the meaning of the words. But it's not necessarily the meaning of the words. It's also the way the words sound. So, like, this is definitely a good definition in that it, like, covers the bases, but you can nitpick it for sure. But I guess the question is, are all vocal or instrumental sounds combined in such a way to produce beauty of form, harmony, and expression of emotion? Are they all music? Or can we come up with examples of these things that aren't music? I don't know. I don't know if that's true or not.
Look at something as simple as a child trying to learn the guitar and making a ton of mistakes. The mistakes we wouldn't call music. We would call it a mistake. I think.
And see, that's an interesting statement he's making. Because I'm not even sure if I agree with that. The mistakes that the child is making learning guitar are not music. I mean, you could say they're not the intended music. But saying they're not music, I don't know if that's true. Like, can we say that that's true? And sometimes a mistake can accidentally lead to, like, better music than you were going to do otherwise. Like, maybe you make a mistake and then it leads to something else. It just doesn't, like, hit right to say that that's not music, because, like, what is this definition? Combined in such a way as to produce beauty of form, harmony, or expression of emotion. Well, it's doing none of those things. A mistake is doing none of those things. But it is vocal or instrumental sounds, and these things can probably accidentally produce beauty of form or harmony. But I don't know, what do you think? Do you think that making mistakes while playing guitar counts as music or not? I'm not sure. When I first heard him say this, I was like, whoa, that's a really bold statement. But then the more I think about it, I kind of find myself agreeing with him.
I think the fact that we separate music from language and noise, and these are all understood things universally by humanity, in and of itself points that there is some sort of concrete definition for it. And more accurately to the sentiment of 12 Tone's point being that we as humans choose when to interpret something musically, I think there is some merit to that. I haven't even touched on rap yet because this is such a complicated subject just to set up. Perlovsky wrote an academic paper called Cognitive Function in Music, and I'm going to read from his abstract. Now, keep in mind, this is a theory, this is not scientific fact, but this will be the basis to build the logic that I will be constructing in order to show you why I don't think rap is music. He presents a hypothesis that is attempting to unify the fields of cognition and music. He proposes a theory upon the origin of music based upon music's role in cognitive function. He says the split is considered of the vocalizations of proto-humans into two types. One, less emotional and more concretely semantic, evolving into language, and the other preserving emotional connections along with semantic ambiguity, evolving into music. So words that humans use that have concrete definitions, semanticism, as opposed to music or sounds that humans use that have an ambiguous meaning to them. You can project your own meaning to them. The evolution of language towards the semantically powerful tool that it is today required emancipation from emotional encumbrances. The way your brain emotionally interprets just the sound coming out of my mouth, not what the words mean that I'm using, is less important than what the definitions of the words are. The emotion of the...
See, this whole theory by this guy with this paper, I just don't understand at all. Like, what is this idea that
reflection in my
that humanity has divorced like aesthetic, emotional qualities of words from their semantical qualities, their meaning? I think tone is very important when speaking. The way you say words matters a lot, sometimes more than the words themselves. And in fact, a lot of the time, the meaning of a sentence actually changes depending on what tone you use when saying the sentence, even if you're saying the exact same words. So I don't really get this at all.
Opposing but no less powerful mechanisms required a compensatory evolution of music towards more differentiated and refined emotionality. Because language got so much more precise, we needed music to have more precise emotionality expressed. They actually grew further apart. The fundamental need for refined music...
And I don't get that either. I don't get where that idea is coming from. Like, that seems... I mean, this is only the abstract. So there's clearly going to be more of an explanation in the actual article. But I don't really see a through line there why the creation of language would also bring about the creation of music.
So if we can agree that there is a difference between language and music, I think we can agree with this. We have to say, okay, so there's semantically ambiguous sound, which can be music, it can just be random noise. And then there's a dividing line where we hit language. You might even be able to say there's a spectrum over which we go between language and ambiguous sound. The reason why I think there's probably a harder line between language and ambiguous sound is because language is based in coding. You have to be able to use the code, understand the code to be able to communicate with it. That is, understand it and be able to send information with it. So why does all of this matter as far as rap goes?
I'm kind of wondering that too.
Well, my first point, but not my primary point, the word rap has actually been diluted from its original meaning. The music community and also just a lot of underprivileged communities tend to use slang a lot more in an approximative language as opposed to precise language, which really can muddy the waters when we...
I think what he's getting at here is that the art of rapping is the art of rhyming to a beat, which is not the same as hip-hop music and doesn't actually constitute an actual genre of music, because you can have rap applied to other genres of music besides just hip-hop. And so what he's going to try to do here, I think the reason he's saying rap isn't music is because he's going to identify rap as something besides the hip-hop genre of music, and say that rap as an art form itself is not music, which I do take issue with, but let's continue.
During the hip-hop movement, when it came to the art of rapping, rapping was the spoken word itself. If that rapping had a beat behind it, that was the musical component, those two were combined, and then another integral part was dancing, but that's not important to this. The MC rapped and the DJ made the music that accompanied it. So if we're looking at a strict purist definition of what rapping actually is, I mean, if you just played that back by itself, just the spoken word, I don't think most people would call that music. It is very clearly semantically driven. Not that...
But it's also got rhyme and rhythm, and so it's not only semantically driven. Semantics is like words being used to convey a meaning, and that's part of rapping. But really, rapping from the beginning, when we're talking about MCs at like dance parties doing shout outs and stuff, rhyming to the beat, this was always about much more than just saying things. Like if it were all about just saying things so that people can understand them, there would be no point in rhyming. There would be no point in making it match the rhythm of the music. So it's not semantically driven. It's only half semantical, which is what all lyrics are. Song lyrics are always, half about meaning and half about sound. Half about words and half about music. That might even be why we don't call them words. We call them lyrics, because it's kind of a different idea. I don't know that I probably made that part up, but it's worth considering.
But that's not the entire point I'm trying to make, though I think it does help support my actual point. Let's use the colloquial definition of what rap means. Colloquially, if we say that's rap, we are talking about a combination of the rapper's words with the DJ's beats behind it. My argument is that even then, the focus is still primarily on semanticism over ambiguity.
And I disagree with this. I don't think that people are primarily focusing on the semantics of rap when they listen to rap. I think they're listening to the whole package, and in fact often they're not even listening to the meaning of the words at all. They're just listening to how they sound. A lot of the time you can't even understand how what the words mean in rap.
Now, I will definitely be the first to admit I have listened to a number of rap songs that my first or several listenings or even listenings afterwards I perceive from a musical perspective. I consume it as music. But just because a person perceives something from a musical perspective, that is not latching on or paying attention to the semantic side of the art, that does not mean inherently that it is music.
Why, though? I'm very curious about his justification of this.
For example, if I'm listening to Russian, I have no idea what they are saying. To me, it is just noise. But is that ambiguous sound? We all have enough context. I mean, even just the truth itself is that the person who is communicating this has an intent to communicate semantically. Just because I observe it as noise does not mean that that becomes noise. So in rap, I think that the intent...
Okay, but the intent of rap has never been just to communicate something through words. That's never been the intent. Like I said, it's always been the intent to communicate something musically through words. And often that can entail not even listening to the words because the music quality of it has importance as well. But there was another point in there that I can't remember. Let me listen to that again.
Has an intent to communicate semantically. Just because...
Oh yeah, the Russian example. So we're talking about noise, which is another category of sound. So he's saying that it would be wrong to call spoken Russian noise because that it is trying to communicate something. Intent matters in that case. I don't think it's even wrong to call it noise. I think when I'm talking blah, 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 it's noise. Whether or not I'm trying to communicate something. I'm making noise to communicate something. It's noise, it's sound, whether there's intent behind it or not. So I disagree with that definition of noise, that noise has to not have intent. That seems wrong.
I would say the intent is very important in order to fully appreciate the art. And I would say in music, intent is the least important thing because of its ambiguity. Another example would be this speech from Independence Day.
I don't think that music has to be entirely ambiguous in order to be musical. I don't think that the lack of ambiguity takes anything away from the musical quality of the work. And I don't know if this is a point he's getting from that theorist whose article he was reading, or if this is something that he's reading into this idea that the guy wasn't actually trying to communicate when he talked about ambiguity. But yeah, let's listen to Bill Pullman in Independence Day.
We're going to survive. Today, we celebrate our Independence Day.
It has a lot of similar elements to rap. It has a vocal part up front with definable rhythm, inflection, definitive tone, intentionality, and there is a musical accompaniment behind it that is complementing it, that is clearly rhythmically aligned to accentuate the performance. It is technically possible to remove the picture and just absorb the sound and say, oh, I'm looking at this like a song, but we know that the intent is not for this to be a song, this is a speech. So movies can have very similar characteristics to rap music, but we would not call that movie music. We wouldn't call that segment a song. Music is a highly subjective art form, and I feel like rap's semanticism being a primary focus really draws away from the ability to interpret for yourself. For clarity, I'm not saying that rap can't be interpreted multiple ways, but it definitely narrows down the definitions. So the next argument back at my point is, well, what about lyrics in other songs, in other music? Again, I would point back to what is the focus? In most rap songs that I know...
See, and I think this is a really weird fallacy. He's like talking about different kinds of music as if one is more focused inherently on semantics than another. But that is an interesting question, though, this idea of the whole Independence Day speech. Like, is that whole package music? Like, we know that the music playing underneath the speech is music, but is the speech itself combined with the music, does that constitute its own music? In the same way that rap, hip-hop music is its own music with the beat and the rap together. And that's kind of hard to say because it elicits less of a musical response from us than hip-hop. And that's the thing about this. That's what makes defining music difficult, and what makes the concept of music so ineffable is this way where we can see much less of a musical quality in this Independence Day speech. But it's hard to then use strict semantics to explain why it isn't music. So if we're just going by the definitions we've created, it kind of seems like this is music, or it has to be music. But then I think, well, it isn't obviously not music, so because it's not obviously not music, maybe other people might think of it as music. Maybe there is someone who would just clip that sound out of the movie and then put that on their playlist and just listen to it as music. I don't necessarily think intent really matters when defining whether something is music or not. But it just goes to show how tricky the whole business of this kind of definition is.
The focus, the primary thing, is the semantic storytelling. A prime example of this would be folk. I also think folk much more accurately fits in storytelling than it does in music.
This, I believe, was the moment I stopped watching the video the first time, because this is like the dumbest thing I've ever heard this guy say. Folk music is like, it's the backbone of all music. All music comes out of folk music. Folk music is just whatever music people played before like recording technology and before like composition and written music existed. So like classical music, that whole composer tradition of music comes out of just a really evolved advanced version of folk music. Folk music isn't even all sung. A lot of folk music is, in fact, like I would say like a good, at least half of folk music is instrumental. How can you say that music that is instrumental is all about storytelling? It makes no sense. This guy doesn't have any fucking clue what he's talking about regarding the folk music. You can just like sign away any credibility he had on the subject of folk music. That really irritated me as a folk music listener.
Even if you look at a lot of examples of rap and folk, the actual musical portions play a secondary role to the primary role of communicating a story, but making it in a more emotional tinted format. When you look at even pop music or a lot of other genres, the lyrics most times are very secondary. The focus is on the emotional manipulation and how that song makes you feel based upon the ambiguous sound.
But the lyrics still matter, and the lyrics still change the way the song is interpreted emotionally. What we have is a continuum of, I guess, semantical versus ambiguous would be the term that we're using in this conversation. Semantical versus ambiguous. And I think that it's difficult and very subjective to determine like where different types of songs fit on the in that category, in that categorization, on that continuum. And I definitely think it's way too ambiguous of it, or I guess I shouldn't use that word because we've defined it in this conversation already. It's too imprecise of a grouping to be able, and too subjective to be able to determine like what is and isn't music efficiently, I think. And certainly, if there is a musical quality at all in something, then you have to call it music. Because that musical quality, whatever that means, is music. We've established that. So even without the backing track, if there's a musical quality to rapping, then it has to be music. Even if it's a much more... the musical side of it is a little bit more muted in comparison to the semantical side. It's still music because it is musical. But what musical is difficult to define.
This is where Jesse brought up a great point, is that all art is in one way or another storytelling. And one distinction I would make with music is that it is much easier to project your own story onto this art because it is more ambiguous.
But also, it's much easier to just not even tell a story with music. Like when I listen to Smenko Horo by Plank Steve, for instance, I'm not thinking of a story when I listen to that song. It doesn't tell a story. It's not intending to tell a story. It's just a dance number. So I would actually say that there isn't even a lot of projection of storytelling in music. And I would say music is actually kind of divorced from storytelling unless it happens to have a storytelling element in it, which would be semantical and lyrical. Or unless somebody with a lot of imagination kind of forms a story around it in their mind while listening to it. But that's not necessary for enjoying the music. I think the way music sort of lights up our brains in exciting ways maybe resembles the feeling we get from a good story, and because of that we have this sort of projection of the idea that all enjoyment of that sort must be storytelling, but it's not. It's clearly not storytelling, I think.
Whereas in most rap, that story is relatively strictly defined. So you could say, in my opinion, the stricter you define the story for people, the less musical it becomes, in my opinion. And also, if we look at Perlovsky...
The less musical it becomes... how, though? If the quality of the music is... all right, let's take... If we have a tune, right? It's the same tune regardless of whether it's sung with words or not. In one case, it's not sung with words. In one case, it is. How is the one that is sung with words less musical than the one that isn't? It doesn't make any sense. Adding one thing doesn't subtract from the other thing. Adding semantics doesn't subtract from musicality. And this is where I think he's wrong, is that musicality is not the same as ambiguity. Or he's not saying it is, but ambiguity doesn't determine musicality. Even though musicality is an ambiguous thing, and it can be characterized by its ambiguity. But having that ambiguity there, and then adding semantical meaning to it doesn't necessarily make it less musical, I think, which is the distinction that I have here with what he's saying.
I love rap. I love hip-hop. And part of my appreciation for it is, in my opinion, realizing that it so perfectly walks this fine line between musicality and semanticism. It's almost dead center. To the point of saying that it is a semantic or musical art doesn't do it justice. It kind of sits in this great, what is right now a no man's land, and I think it deserves a home. I think it deserves its own defining art form by itself, outside of music and outside of poetry.
So he's saying it's not poetry, and it's not semantics, and it's not music. I would say it's just all three. I don't see why we have to act like it's something different from those just because it happens to combine those. And I think that's the fallacy with his thinking here, that he thinks that adding one thing, as I said, adding one thing must somehow subtract from the other thing. Like, this town ain't big enough for the two of us. Well, I think it kind of is.
There are a lot of people who don't like rap who I think would better understand rap if they knew how to, no pun intended, wrap their brains around it. There is a certain, I would say, almost zen...
That's kind of an interesting idea. I think that a lot of the time, if you don't get what something is and have a hard time categorizing it, it can make it that distract you from what's good about it. So if you're busy trying to listen to rap and wonder why it's not musical enough, then maybe that is what's distracting you from enjoying it. It's sort of like if you're watching a movie and you're not a big musical fan, and then so you're watching a movie and it's normal, and then a song comes on and just disrupts the whole flow of the movie by slowing down the pace, because that's what songs and movies do. They offer a chance to just stop the story in its tracks and focus on one idea and develop that idea. And if that is weird to you because it's just the pacing is odd and like it doesn't match how you're used to hearing stories told, and you don't really get the point of it, and you don't get why the characters are behaving in this non-diegetic way, then it can make it hard to enjoy the movie. But if you just account for that in your head and you go, okay, I know what this is now, and I'm going to try to appreciate it for what it is instead of wanting it to be something else, then you'll be able to appreciate it a lot more. So I think that's what he's saying with this, and I will agree with that point. Okay, so that was the first video. We've covered that. Now I want to watch the second video and see how he's amended this opinion. So this one is called Regarding Rap Isn't Music. So it's regarding the video he made previously.
So smoke 'em if you got 'em, came to the top all the way from the bottom. All right, I'm gonna do something that not many people on the internet do. I've changed my mind. Having properly done some time to think about, aggregate, and share these ideas with you, and then getting your feedback on what you thought of my ideas, I have actually changed my position on this. Yes, I do think that rap qualifies as music, like rap in the colloquial sense. I still don't think that the spoken word portion of it is, but I actually want to dive into that a little later in the video because I want to present some things first. To address some things up front.
So it kind of seemed in the previous video like he wasn't denying the fact that rap in the colloquial sense of rap music isn't music. But here he's like, I've changed my mind. And then he's like, but I still think that the spoken word part of rap isn't music. Well, then what did you change your mind about?
It is very difficult, nigh impossible, to be able to define something as music without giving strict parameters as to what falls within and without the definition. I did admit this up front, and if it wasn't like clear enough, I definitely clarified in the comments. I also clarified in the comments that I was very open to having my mind changed. I think now I actually have an interesting way of putting a little bit more of a parameter around it, but not exactly. I think based upon the information that I provided in the video and the information that I got back from people in the comment section, I could probably get close to having a working definition for music if I took the time to do it, which I may or may not. Someone in the comment section says their definition is you know it when you hear it. This is not a good definition, though it is an integral part of trying to understand it for sure. To more precisely hone in what I think this person is trying to say, and what I think a part of a definition for music would be, music is in part an individual psychological phenomenon that we socially aggregate. People have these subjective experiences that we share with one another, and where the overlaps come in.
You know what's funny is that that's kind of what the other guy was saying when he said music is whatever we perceive to be musical. Although I think the distinction here is that Mike is saying that that is not itself a good enough definition for music, but it's an important building block in trying to understand this phenomenon so that we can come up with a suitable definition.
When I said in the video that I think it's possible to scientifically nail down what music is, I was referring specifically to the experience. And yes, there is no arguing that what music is to a person is open to subjective experience. I think that the point I was...
So that's what he meant when he was talking about data and science and whatever. That was what was confusing. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, what, we don't have enough data or technique to be able to determine how to define this concept that we all kind of should know what it is? But I guess what he was saying is that what part of what is going to help us understand what music is understanding exactly what the psychological phenomenon that creates our concept of music is. And until we can understand that, we're going to have a hard time understanding what music is. I think that's what he was saying.
Even though sometimes there is more semantic focus on it, it's very hard to say that you don't experience it on a musical level strongly, even more strongly than the semantic, which again comes down to subjective experience. But gathering the information I've gathered from your comment section, I think it's pretty easy to say. Now, if we do say that what we experience as music is open.
So maybe that's kind of part of the sticking point for him in making this response video to himself. Is basically what I brought up when I was watching that video is the idea that because I and a lot of other people when listening to rap music don't perceive it semantically as much as we do musically, then this idea that the rap is more about the semantics doesn't really work.
And then we run into the whole problem of, well, if we accept everything and we accept nothing as music, then we just have Schrodinger's art form. It's all not music and music at the same time, which makes the utility of it useless. Coming back to the social component of this individual experience.
But not necessarily, because if we define music based on this category that Mike brought up in this video of the whole of music is defined by the psychological phenomenon that we experience when we hear it. It depends on the definition. Depends on personal experience, but we can say that personal experience is the definition. Like it's not that music is an art form at that point. It's that it's an experience of some sort of psychological phenomenon, and that people create art in order to facilitate that experience. People create sound, rather, to facilitate that experience. So the music is what people create to facilitate that experience. Or the music is the sound that facilitates that experience. I don't think that's not a good enough definition. I think that's a perfectly serviceable definition if we can understand even what that experience is. And that's the problem. But actually, I think these two videos are helping me understand more what music is. Because I hadn't really hit upon that idea that it's all down to the experience of music. Or maybe I had in the context of what that other guy was saying, that music is whatever we perceive to be musical. It was kind of a bad way of phrasing it because it was such a circular argument. But it actually wasn't a bad way of understanding it if you don't look at it as, well then what is musical pertaining to music? Instead you go, what is musical pertaining to the psychological phenomenon that makes someone perceive something and use that term to describe it. We all have this term in our heads that we know means something, and we use it when we know it when we hear it. And so we use that term, and it's useful and meaningful in that way. But we don't really know how to describe what it is. And so because of that, we can say that there's this phenomenon in psychology that makes someone hear something and call it music. And defining that, we can say, well, whatever sounds create that experience are music. It's all kind of coming together for me now.
We share these experiences together in society, and we aggregate these hard lines or gray areas that we draw as individuals. Then we arrive at approximations of what is or isn't music. Nobody's gonna say Beethoven isn't music. That's a social approximation. No one's going to say that a guy walking up with a chainsaw and cutting down a tree is music. That is a social approximation. The individual's experience of saying that a person cutting down a tree with a chainsaw being music is, I don't want to say invalidated, but I would say outranked by the social approximation. Someone saying that Beethoven isn't music.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that. The thing is, I think you can say that objectively Beethoven is music. Because objectively a lot of people experience it as music. And it was created to be music. But I don't think you can objectively say, or I don't think you can say, rather, that a guy cutting down a tree with a chainsaw isn't music, just because most people agree that it isn't, even if someone says it is. If that person experiences it as music, then we have to say, well, it can be music. That doesn't mean we all have to treat it as if it's music, because most of us don't perceive it that way. But I don't think that, like, the social approximation, whatever term he's using, really matters when determining what isn't music as much as it does when determining what is music.
When I tried to present this argument, I wanted to work with this definition of saying rap was its own art form and not music from the strongest examples I thought I could give by steel manning the argument. I'm thinking about rap songs that have the strongest musical depth and excellent flow and rhyme scheme and just really artistically profound stuff. And lo and behold, one of the most vapid examples of rap actually disproves my point quite clearly. Gucci Gang. Mumble rap is called mumble rap because you can't understand what the fuck they're talking about. But the fact that you can't understand them, even though they are speaking words that
I don't know, I could understand, my billa do cocaine. I know what that means. Maybe I speak mumble rapper. I fuck a bitch, I forgot a name. Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang, Gucci gang. You know what was a good line in that song is when he said, it was the one about tutory. I can't remember how it goes. But it's it's supposed to be statutory. But it's just tutory. And it was a pun based on, someone fucking their teacher or something. That was kind of clever. Anyway, let's go.
Be interpreted semantically means that you are more predisposed to actually absorbing it musically. So then you're just well, shit, all right, I guess it's a fair point. Even though as an art form I find it extremely vapid and stupid, it's easier to interpret it on a musical level than it is on a semantic level, especially with its semantic shallowness. And also with the fact that repetition is a huge part of people interpreting things musically. And the number of times the word Gucci Gang was repeated, oh my lord. So yes, I mean, rap obviously lies on its own spectrum, and that larger thing that we call rap lies on the spectrum of sound, which goes from noise to music to language. At least in my personal opinion, I'd say it's pretty easy to say that spoken word isn't music. Though spoken word falls within the category of rap, but there's a lot more.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that spoken word falls into the category of rap per se. I don't know. I mean, spoken word is spoken word music. If I recite one of my poems right now, would that be music? I don't think so. Even though it has rhyme and it has a rhythmic quality to it. But it doesn't really feel musical in the way rap does. Because rap, you know what rap does? It makes you go like this. Me reciting one of my poems would not do that. But the thing is, not every music has to make you go like this, Some music, like classical music, makes you go, do all kinds of random conductor fucking motions. And then sometimes it doesn't make you do anything at all. Sometimes you just sit there totally still listening to some music, and it's still music. But I don't know, is spoken word music? I mean, it seems to kind of conform to a lot of what qualifies as music. It has rhythm, it has rhyme, but it doesn't feel musical in the way rap feels musical to me. But clearly he's saying that rap doesn't really feel musical to him, or maybe he's just getting caught up in the definitions. It's difficult to say. It's clear that there's more, rap is less forgiving musically than spoken word is. Spoken word you can get away with a lot more than you can in rap. With rap, I think you have to be a little bit more conscientious of, how exactly, because you have to time it right. The track is underneath you, and you have to time it to the beat. You have to know where the end of the phrase is going to fall. And you have to meet it there, or else you're late. And that's a musical phenomenon in a way that you don't get with spoken word. You can take your time, you can go fast or slow, do whatever the hell you want with spoken word. You can't really do that with rap. Rap has to be a little bit more structured. And also with rap, you tend to sing it more, Cutie the bomb met her at a beauty salon with a baby Louis Vuitton under her underarm. She said, I can tell you rock, I can tell by your charm. Far as girls, you got a flock. I can tell by your charm and your arm, but I'm looking for the one. Have you seen her? My psychic tell me she'll have an ass like Serena, Trina, Gina for Lopez. So it's there's a sung element of rap as well. It's not just spoken word. So I would say it's fair to say I can't exactly definitively define any way that spoken word doesn't qualify as music, but I can say definitively that rap is more musical than spoken word.
And while I definitely do get a lot more of the semantic side of things from rap, that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be its own thing, even though where I consume it from, it kind of is, but I can definitely say, hey, this is music. So you know what? I've changed my mind.
So with that said, perhaps what he's getting at is that he agrees with my statement that you don't have to take something away. You don't have to subtract something in order to add something. You don't have to subtract musicality in order to add meaning. Because music doesn't become less musical by having less ambiguity in it. What in the music is ambiguous is still ambiguous and is still therefore music, even if you add to it something else which is semantical and therefore not ambiguous.
And if you think that my new perspective is wrong, by all means, let's continue the conversation. My favorite comment.
I mean, I don't even know what his new perspective really is. I mean, he clarified some things, I guess, in this video. But it's more like, honestly, I feel like this video doesn't really do much to counteract the last video. It just sort of continues the conversation. Like, I'm not even entirely sure what he changed his mind about here, other than saying rap is music, but he still said he thought the spoken word part of rap isn't music, so I still don't get it. Like, what about rap is music if the spoken word part, which is the rap, isn't music? I don't get it. So I think that's basically the end of this video, basically the end of the part where he's really talking about the subject. So this is just, like I said, this is just a bunch of thoughts that I have while watching these videos. I don't, like, this is not a takedown of this, but I thought that this topic was interesting enough that it was worth doing not on stream, but rather as a standalone video with my camera and everything. I did kind of want to make something out of this discussion because I found it interesting enough to make something real out of. Okay, we've established basically that I think rap is music, but is rap as musical as other things that are music? Because we know that rap is less tuneful than other things that are music. Does that make it less musical? And another thing is that blues music, which rap has its origins ultimately in, the sung part of blues music is often a lot less musical than other kinds of sung music. The sung part of blues music is often very simple melodically, just kind of da 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 da. It kind of crawls along relatively in the same spot. It's not doing like Tchaikovsky and going da 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 da. It's not doing that. So even, I think it's weird to pick on rap specifically, as if other kinds of sung music are not, less musical than other kinds of music as well, or less tuneful rather. But again, we get this question: is something being less tuneful, does that make it less musical? And that it might. I think it might make it less musical. But I don't know if the response we're getting, I don't know if the musical response we're getting when we listen to that is less of a musical response, really. We are recognizing that it's less tuneful, but that doesn't mean that we experience it as less musical. Because music is about more than just tune. So there we go. Is rap music? Yes, it is. I don't have a sign-off anymore because it's not vetting.